Motion pictures made their debut in Modesto during the second decade of the last century. There was the Star Theater on 10th Street, where the old Crest building presently stands. The auditorium at 6th and I, later known as the Mary Garden. The Isis featured daily picture changes of films that had been licensed and censored. The Dreamland, just around the corner from the Isis, boasted of its exits and ventilation. The Modesto Theater, built in 1912, was the very first to show talking pictures. It also featured vaudeville shows and community events. You can still see the dome of what was once the Modesto Theater on 10th Street. Other local theaters included the Lyric, later named the Esquire. The Quonset Hut-styled La Loma Theater once stood at the corner of Yosemite and La Loma next to the former Fars department store. The Richards Theater on J Street featured second-run films, serials, and westerns. It underwent several name changes, including the National, the Princess, and finally, the Covell. In 1921, Modesto's Strand Theater celebrated its grand opening with a showing of The Mark of Zorro, starring the swashbuckling Douglas Fairbanks. With a capacity of 1,800, a mighty Wurlitzer organ, elaborate murals, and an Art Nouveau curtain, the Strand was advertised as the Valley's finest theater. All of these theaters slowly declined, and many fell to the Wreckers Ball. The State Theater, which opened in 1934, could have suffered a similar fate, but fortunately for our community, that didn't happen. This is the story of Modesto's historic State Theater. Beginning in the 1990s and continuing today, local citizens came to the rescue to save Modesto's remaining historic theater and to ensure its continued operation. The State first opened its doors on December 25, 1934. The theater was designed by S. Charles Lee, one of the nation's outstanding designers of Art Deco movie houses. He designed more than 300 movie theaters, including the Merced, the Fox Theater in Stockton, and the Fox Theater in Bakersfield. The architect's motto was, "The show starts on the sidewalk." The architect's plan was brought to life in Modesto by local builder Harry Brown at a cost of $100,000. The first film shown at the new State Theater was Flirtation Walk, starring Dick Powell, Ruby Keeler, and Pat O'Brien. It was accompanied by La Cucaracha, a romantic melody drama of old Mexico. General admission was 35 cents, loges were 40 cents, and children got in for a dime. Jack Ulrich, who at a very young age managed the State Theater shortly after it opened, describes his efforts to promote the new State Theater.
They let me do the advertising for the theater. I had my little car, covered it with the prizes, and drove around like that to advertise. When we were playing the, I believe it was called Old Chicago, went up on the roof and we got some smudge pots and put them along the edge and had them blowing smoke, which someone thought it was on fire, and the fire engines came and so forth, and turned out to be just one of my ideas that boomeranged a little bit.
2 years ago, when they had the grand opening of this theater, I came that night, and I came by myself, and I walked up the ramp, and I lost it. I just got so emotional, I couldn't believe it. In fact, I'm getting emotional right now.
I parked around the corner on 14th Street, and as I came around the corner, immediately I felt like I was back in high school again. Things seemed the same. I felt like I was coming to the theater again, and started to look for the little restaurant that was next door that we always went to after the movies, so it was a wonderful feeling.
I was in the 7th grade at Roosevelt Junior High School. We lived on 13th and H. My mother had a boarding and rooming house for men. She said women are too hard to please. And we could walk very easily from there down to the State Theater, my sister and I, clutching our dime in our hands, and we congregated with all of the other children who were waiting outside of the theater for the doors to open. And it was very exciting. And for us, a dime was big money.
My earliest memories of the stage had to do with either taking my children to movies here, but probably more importantly was the women's group that came here for its lecture series, Omega Nu. One of the guest speakers was Alex Haley, and of course he drew an enormous number of people, and it was very profound and much enjoyed by everyone.
All I can really remember is just growing up in the State Theater and thinking it was a wonderful place to go. This was my dad. He started out as a usher back in Chicago, and then when he came out to California, then he worked as a projectionist. This is a photo of my dad, Milford Sherholtz, and everybody called him Shorty. The lady in the photo is Rose Sasso, who is the manager of the theater.
First, my name's Jan Sasso. Rose Sasso was my aunt. She was really proud to run the theaters, and we go way back. I mean, Saturdays, this is where everyone would come. Always well dressed. I'm probably one of the few people could see her sitting at a kitchen table with her pajamas on drinking coffee, but you would never see her leave the house unless she was decked out, nice suits, always a brooch, hair always done nice.
Rose was very particular about our appearance. She wanted us to meet her standards, which we did. Rose was a wonderful, wonderful manager, and we gave her our all.
Frankly, the fondest memories I have are coming to the State Theater with my mother. I remember coming to see Vertigo here, which was, I think, the first Hitchcock film I'd ever seen. And she brought me here, and I saw that film, and it really opened my eyes to what I consider great filmmaking.
My earliest memories of the State Theater is, I remember I was very young. My dad was going to school. He was a teacher. He worked part-time here on the weekends and during the summer. And I remember he brought me here quite a bit, and especially during the days when there were no movies showing, when he would be up here prepping or doing whatever, I would pretty much have the place to myself. I'd be able to run around. And actually right now my daughters are down there running around pretty much emulating the same behavior and activities that I used to do.
Movie theaters were being built. I was growing up, and my father liked to go to the serials, so we went to the serials on Saturday afternoon.
There was always a chapter of a serial, and each chapter ended with a cliffhanger. And the cliffhanger left you just breathless to know what was going to happen the next week.
And so many of our friends and people that we went to school with, you know, all those memories are tied up in this building, and I'm sure we're only a small part of the people that lived in this area that feel the same way.
They were going to put usherettes in, and if I would come back and manage the theater, he would let me choose the usherettes. I went back to work, and I did hire the usherettes.
I got this job at the State, and I was just nuts about it. I was so delighted to be able to get to work here. This was a really prime place to work.
There were no jobs for girls in those days unless you wanted to be a waitress or work in the fruit sheds in the summer. And a very coveted job was usherette.
It was so much fun here, and I loved the camaraderie among the other usherettes. We did wear uniforms, and we had summer ones and we had winter ones.
They did have a jacket that had piping around it.
And the summer ones were a lot thinner, and they were navy blue, and I know they had big flary legs on the bottom like the sailors' bell bottoms.
My connection with the State Theater is that my mother, Marguerite Grinstead, was the first spotlight girl when the theater opened in 1934. She stood in the spotlight in the lobby and wore a beautiful gown and greeted the patrons as they came in. And she was not the original choice for the spotlight girl, But when Mr. Mann, the theater owner, came for the opening, he saw her and she had beautiful red hair, so he wanted her to stand under the spotlight. And while she was working here, she met my father, and his name was Bill Owen. He worked as a projectionist, moonlighting here. And some prankster had thrown a stink bomb in the theater, and all the employees had to run and find it, and that's how the two of them met and subsequently married, and were married for 63 years.
We had to stand at a certain station to make sure that, you know, things didn't go awry in the room, and sometimes they did.
The kids were cut-ups, and the movies were packed, and people would throw popcorn boxes, and at the Strand, of course, which had a balcony, you learned after a while not to sit under the balcony because of sprays of soda that would come down and get on you, and I think I was one of those that delighted in tipping over a cup once in a while.
Those kids up in the balcony did naughty things. I will be discreet and say they blew up balloons, but they were not balloons. Yelled and hollered and hooted and whistled, and nobody could control them, but they did it every Saturday night.
I don't know. What are they? Deer?
No. Look like greyhounds. Yeah.
Most people, and myself included, consider it an impala.
I've always viewed them as somewhat fantasy creations.
Mountain goat or something like that.
Well, I would have said antelopes, but that's probably not true.
I was going to ask you what those are.
Gazelles.
Greyhound.
I just call them forest animals.
Antelopes or gazelles, I've heard both.
I want to say they're impalas.
Some of them have longer ears, some of them have no ears. The no ears are greyhounds, the longer ears, some sort of forest-dwelling creature I am unaware of.
I guess we would have to probably get a zoologist to give us the final determination.
Of the old movies, Casablanca, Maltese Falcon, Pride and Prejudice.
The Harvey Girls, lots of times the shows were held over.
Oh, I think Gone with the Wind was probably one of the best films they ever made.
I think the first movie I came to here was Abbott and Costello. Something about zombies.
I do remember one in particular that I probably saw 40 times was Star is Born.
West Side Story.
White Christmas with Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye and
Pinocchio or Cinderella, all that.
Black Cat, White Cat. It's made in some Slovenian country of some sort.
And we're very different. I don't care much for those foreign films or the subtitles or anything like that. I tend to like things like Star Wars and the adventure movies, and you know, those are my types of movies.
Hi, I'm Jerry Olivares. I was a projectionist here from 1979 to about 1990, 91. And wow, it's pretty much kept the same way as when I left. They converted it to a Hispanic theater, and it was one of the first here in the Central Valley. When they first opened, it was hugely successful. Without hesitation, I would say this was the #1 hotspot between, I would say, 1979 to about 1986, 87. My mother and my father ran the theater for my uncles, and they were very innovative. So they had candies and popcorn, the usual stuff, but my father had a very famous sandwich called a torta that was very popular. I remember that. We couldn't make them fast enough. I remember I would be, sometimes I would have to run the movies and I'd have to run downstairs and I'd have to make sandwiches for my dad and I'd have to time it. They were 20 minutes. So I would look at my watch, run downstairs, hopefully get the time right, but sometimes I would be making sandwiches and I'd hear, hey, 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 and I go, oh no, so I'd have to run all the way back upstairs, hurry up, and flip the screen, the movie to the other reel. At 1987, it started the downtrend. I remember my parents doing everything they could to keep the theater going. It was a hard time for all of us. it just came to the point that we had to close.
Through negotiations with Mr. Leo Valdivia, who owned it, this was a Spanish language film theater, and he was hardly using it anymore, we decided to buy it. There was a market as Modesto was becoming more sophisticated to show a lot of the foreign films. Being open for probably 6 months, we decided to do some music. Jazz, Celtic. At one point, we even developed our own State Theater big band under the direction of Ernie Busio.
My musical involvement with the State Theater, when I read in the paper that they were thinking about renovating it and using it for things other than just movies. I had done a few events with John Griswold, and so I approached him about doing a concert as a fundraiser at that time. Basically, that's what our concert was to try to show people the kind of music that we could play and that other groups could play in here. We did opera, we did Broadway, we did Sousa marches, we did big band stuff, some modern jazz stuff, a lot of vocals, and just try to showcase what could be done in here. Started bringing in guest artists as diverse as Myron Florin from the Lawrence Welk Show. We packed the house. That's John Faddis, James Moody, Bill Watrous, and also, you know, when the State Theater hired people like Little Anthony and the Imperials, we backed them up. Even Rich Little came in and he needed some musical accompaniment. We would provide that for them. It's been a good thing, I think, for everybody all around, for the theater, for the community, for us as musicians.
We formed a board of directors of outstanding local citizen leaders. We teamed up with the management team at the Modesto Symphony Orchestra, who provided us in the inception of the revitalization of the State Theater and through its initial operations with operational leadership and a tremendous amount of wisdom and help. Had to face a lot of unknowns in an old structure. We were blessed to have some of the most competent help in the Central Valley working with us, most of them donating their time to help make sure that the structure was intact, that the murals were properly restored, that the facility, you know, was brought back to life.
The State Theater is unique in that we are still featuring reel-to-reel. Most theaters nowadays are going to have a digital projector. What we do is we load each reel by hand, and we have 2 projectors. So what I have to do is look for these tiny little cue marks that are going to be in the upper right hand of the movie. And as soon as I see that cue mark, the first one, I drop my dowser and I actually start the power to the projector. The next cue mark I see, which will be a few seconds later, I actually hit a button which will switch from one projector to the other projector, and providing hopefully a seamless transition from one scene to the next. So you won't find that in too many theaters nowadays. And even more rare is a woman like me doing a job like this. Most projectionists are usually men that have been doing it most all of their lives.
I've done it for years. Yeah, I was about 16, I think, when I first started. One little 100-seat house, the theater in Gonzales.
Anybody who grew up in the area, anybody who's went to school here, anybody who lived here for a period of time, you know, this was a landmark.
I've been involved with a great number of organizations and events in Modesto, but I must admit that my involvement with the State Theater is probably the most significant and the most rewarding of all of the ones that I have done.
I think it's really great for us to honor the past and to honor venues like this that have so much thought and care put into their architecture design.
I think anything that anyone does to keep it in the public eye, I think, is very good.
It was a very big part of our life. I'm very grateful for it being here. And they've done a beautiful job on restoring it. And I'm so glad they did. What a shame if this had been lost. It'd take a lot of memories away.
Went to the show to love the latest movies. Let everyone know we were cool just being there. Passing through time, the theater took us through our ages. Cowboy dreams and Christmas shows, foreign films in Art Deco. I even fell in love over the rainbow. Some things I know,
some things I know,
and some things I learn.
Some things I learn,
some things I still don't understand. Like, where did it go? And how can love hurt so much? Whatever happened to the strand? I had a girl,
she was my girl,
and we had a dream.
We had a dream.
We would go cruising slowly and talk of everything we dared touch. The movie house closed. We grew and watched it changing faces, broken glass and crumbling stones, faded dreams from long ago. I even lost my love this side of the rainbow. Some things I know,
some things I know,
and some things I learn.
Some things I learn,
some things I still don't understand.
Like,
where did it go? And how can love hurt so much? Whatever happened to the strand? Like, where did it go? And how can love hurt so much? Whatever happened? What really happened? Whatever happened to the strand?